Alright. Time for a little more background on the whole genealogy story we got going on here. So, what got me into genealogy and ultimately DNA testing? My grandmother's infidelity. That's the shortest answer. World War II was going on, so was Grandma. Dad never knew his dad. I kind of went into that a little bit earlier, the previous video. But we'll set the stage. It's 1941. Family is living in Oklahoma. My grandmother, Juanita. I know Juanita. Sounds like a Spanish background name, but she was named for her dad, John. And she was born in Texas, I believe. And so there's just some of that Texas stuff going on. That's how she ended up Juanita. But she was very much a Caucasian. Very, 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 very much Caucasian. In fact, her daddy was a Townsend and her mama was a Benge. B-E-N-G-E. Probably French. Benge. But in 1941, the Benge family, the extended Benge family, so my grandmother's, her side of the family, my grandmother's mother's side of the family, because Juanita's mother was Carrie Ann Ava Benge, and she married a Townsend man. So, but her parents, my grandmother's parents, Corinne Eva Benge, and I believe maybe even my grandmother's grandparents, so 2 or 3 generations of the Benge family, decided they were leaving Oklahoma in 41 and headed towards California. Now, other members of the family, the extended family of the Benges, had already headed out that direction. There were some already living in Arizona that already put roots down in Arizona. So they knew, at least one cousin, so they knew that on their way across, as they were, heading across Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, and once they got to Arizona, they would have a decent place to land and decent jobs there. And so that was the aim. Okay? So in the summer of 41, fall 41, they left Texas, left Oklahoma, Texas and Oklahoma. I believe some members of the family were still in Texas. But Grandma and the Benges, were in Oklahoma. That's where they'd been living. Farms had been lost. The Depression had done its damage. The land wasn't productive anymore, and they couldn't divide it up too much further, so the homesteads were the homesteads. The Townsends still had their homesteads, some land in Texas. The Bowleses, who on my Townsend side had land in Texas, but again, the land wasn't worth a damn anymore. So everybody was headed west, headed for California. That's where everybody was going. My family included. So, fall of 41, they're aiming to hit that long staple cotton down around Eloy. And they hit the Eloy area. Again, because they're coming from, they stop off in West Texas, because there's family there in West Texas, Brownfield, I believe. Somewhere there in West Texas, just close to the New Mexico border. But so they'd come down from there, and they get to Arizona, they get down around Tucson, what's now Marana, Eloy, and there's cotton there, and there's federal cotton camps. There's actually got FSA camps, the Farm Security Administration had started setting up some camps because the trap camps that were being set up privately were really abusing these migrant workers. And again, these are migrant workers that are Americans out of Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas, Okies and Arkies, primarily. Yes, there were African Americans. Yes, there were Hispanics, but primarily these were Okies and Arkies heading west. They were people that had farms that were now harvesting other people's farms. And my family hit Eloy, Arizona on Halloween, 1941. And the reason I know this is because, clearly at a much later date during my research, I had been trying to find my grandmother's Social Security records to find out who she might have been working for at the time down there in Arizona, because there were rumors that my real grandfather, my dad's real dad, might have been an employer of my grandmother. And so I figured, okay, well, so let's see if we can find out where she was working, and then we can figure out who was working there at the time and see if we can't narrow down some likely suspects. Well, as luck would have it, I got that research paperwork back. This was after the internet or before the internet, right before the internet maybe. So 30 years ago. But paperwork comes back, and she didn't work for anybody in the years that I requested. I think I requested 40, 41, 42. She didn't have any employers listed. Now, that doesn't mean she didn't work for anybody. It just meant nobody paid Social Security taxes for her during that time period. So she could have been getting paid under the table, or might have been doing, whatever it is. But nobody was paying taxes on her work. And so I thought I'd hit a dead end. And then I'm looking a little closer at the paperwork. And it turns out, and this is how I know that they hit Eloy, Arizona on Halloween, was because the day that my grandmother applied for her very first Social Security card was that Halloween day, 1941. You see, it turns out she had never had to work for somebody else prior to that. They'd always worked on the farm, or they'd owned farms or worked on family farms. Grandpa's farm or what have you, lived on Grandpa's farm. And so, they didn't have, and farmers at that time didn't have to have Social Security cards. So Grandma had never actually worked for somebody and actually had taxes taken out. So she had to, for the very first time, fill out her Social Security paperwork. As luck would have it, roughly 2 or 3 weeks prior to when she would have had to have conceived my dad. See, my dad was born in August 42. And so we're looking at October, November, maybe early December for gestation time for my dad to be born August 11th, 1942. So, like I said, I just got really lucky and found out that she got her Social Security card on October 31st, 1941. And sometime in that next month, November, was when she got pregnant with my dad. And again, knowing a little something about history and knowing a little bit about government activities, I can picture these people pulling into this Farm Services Administration or Farm Security Administration federally run government camp. And now the brags about the government camp where they had running water, they had tents, they could borrow irons, they could check out irons, there was a school on site. So they were a little bit better taken care of camping areas for these migrant workers. The thing is, this is a government operation. It's 1941 and it's a government operation. So as you pull in, they're handing you pamphlets and paperwork. So you got to fill out who's in your group, how many's in your group, how many adults are they going to be working. If they're going to be working, they need to fill out this paperwork. If they're going to be doing this, they need to fill out this paperwork. If you got this many children, you got to fill out this paperwork. So as these vehicles with these migrant workers pulled up, they all got handed pamphlets that had to be filled out and turned in. So that's how my grandma ended up filling out her Social Security paperwork. And the reason she didn't work for anybody was one of two reasons. Either A, she had a young enough child, and she did. My Uncle Gerald was only a couple years older than my dad, so he'd have been 2-3 years old when this was going down. Would have made her the babysitter, made her sticking around watching everybody's babies while everybody else went out to pick, while everybody else tall enough to pick went out to pick cotton. My grandma probably ended up being the babysitter. Or, what's even more likely, is that she was out there picking cotton too. She just filled up her bag and handed it off to somebody else in her group, and that person in her group went and got it weighed and got it paid and paid the taxes, whatever taxes there might have been. It may very well be that the head of the household would have been the one that had signed for all of the cotton that got picked by the family. Very easily done that way. Or you'd have children that would be putting stuff in the bags, and the children would all put it in, and it'd be Grandpa's bag, or whatever the case may be. So she may very well have been working picking cotton, or she may have just been the babysitter. But either way, she filled out that Social Security card, and so it pinpoints that they were there. And the thing is, you fill out that Social Security card, you don't fill that out and then not hang out there long enough to get that card returned to you or mailed to you. Okay? And maybe you wanted to get, maybe you arranged for it to be forwarded, but generally speaking, you know, I figured out that there was a really good chance that if Grandma was there on October 31st, she was probably still there 2 to 3 weeks later when she got pregnant with my dad. So again, I was reasonably certain I knew where I was looking for now. I still didn't have DNA testing done yet, but I knew where. I had a really good idea. There had been rumors that it might have been in that little place in New Mexico called Casa Grande, but it wasn't. The timing didn't work out. And again, the piece de resistance is that Social Security card. And again, later research will prove Eloy was the place, so my hunch was right. But so anyhow, here they are in Eloy, Arizona. Now, articles written at the time will tell you that Eloy, Arizona was considered one of the last Wild West towns here in the U.S. And that was because there were still gunfights on Main Street. Main Street was all saloons, nothing else. Saloons and liquor stores and motels. And that was it. Dance halls. And it was wild. And the sheriffs took a cut from all the dancing girls and all the prostitution. They all had to pay for a license to work. So this was all, it was absolutely, again, 1941, they were still having shootouts on Main Street and lynchings. Yes, you heard me right, lynchings. There's plenty of history. In fact, Guido Lesueur, fine educator there at the University of Arizona, has written fairly extensively about the black experience in Southern Arizona. I highly recommend her work, Guido Lesueur. Look her up. But so we were in a pretty wild place, and you can imagine Friday nights got really wild. Especially with all these cotton pickers taking their money and heading into town on Friday evening. As they would be wont to do. And so again, we know that now I know Eloy's where the family jumps off on their migrant trail. Eloy, Arizona is where my grandma meets my mystery grandfather and gets together with my mystery grandfather and causes my father to become. And this is where all the rumors start, because the rumors that the different family members over the years told us was that Grandma got caught with this man. It wasn't the only time she got caught cheating. But this one people remembered down there around Eloy, because the man got caught middle of the day by family members. And there was a fight. And apparently, Mystery Grandpa put up enough of a fight that it took multiple men in my grandmother's family to whoop him. Though whoop him they did. And they beat him unconscious. And they threw him in one of the drainage canals that fed those cotton fields, and presumed that they had killed him. And for the longest time, I did not know whether they had killed him or just beaten him, because the story was that they had beaten him to within an inch of his life. And some said they went ahead and took that last inch too. But they beat him to within an inch of his life and threw him in the, what did my Uncle Garland say? Swirled him down the sewer. swirled him down the sewer. So, here we are. Fall of 1941, sometime first couple of weeks in November. Grandma, unbeknownst to her, is pregnant with my dad. She gets caught having relations with this man, and this man is beat damn near to death, or maybe to death. He wasn't beaten to death. You don't see this. He was beaten very badly and run off, and then, because of the horrible beating that they gave this man, and because it turns out this man wasn't a migrant, he lived there in Eloy, Arizona. And more importantly, his in-laws, his wife, spoiler alert, he was married too. His wife's family had prominent holdings there. And so, one of the things that was said, or that they say he said, was that even while the beating was going down, all he cared about was that they not tell his wife or his wife's family. That apparently cheating wasn't an abnormal thing for him, and he was on his last legs for this, that his wife's family would do more damage to him than my grandmother's family. So he's like, kick my ass if you got to, but just don't tell my wife's family. Don't tell my wife. Don't tell my wife. Don't tell my wife. So, and again, these are the stories I'm told by people that don't know his name. They know what he looked like, dark skin, dark eyes. Might have been, the rumors were he might be part Native American, he might be part Mexican, might be part, whatever. They didn't know. Part Mexican, they weren't sure. Okay? But they knew the stories were there was a beating, they ran him off, and then because of the beating, and because of it turns out that, again, that this guy's family was fairly prominent, and they were concerned about problems coming down from it, that Grandma skedaddled. They sent Grandma away post-haste, not knowing she was pregnant yet. They sent Grandma away. They sent Grandma forward off to California, where some, again, I'd mentioned before, some members of the family had already gone west and had already set up. Like I said, there was some family in Arizona already that had already got themselves established. Well, there was some family up in California that apparently, up in the Bay Area, had already gotten established as well. And so my grandmother, 22 years old with 2 kids, was, cheating on her husband, was sent forward. Oh yeah. She was cheating on her husband because she's traveling with her mom and her extended family members from there. But I guess I didn't mention where Mr. Madden was, did I? Well, he wasn't with them. Grandma and Mr. Madden were, I guess, legally separated. They were not living together. So, to recap, Eloy, Arizona, November 1940. Grandma has met the man. Grandma has had sex with the man. Grandma is now pregnant unknowingly and headed and being sent forward to California because of all the drama, her getting caught having a little bit of lust in the dust in the cotton camp caused. So part of the family takes off for California with her. Some of the rest of the family stays there in Arizona, but eventually they move on from the cotton. And Grandma is headed towards the Bay Area with the baby in her belly and never going to see the father ever again. And we're going to leave it right there. The skedaddling out of Eloy. Barbara Allen, giving you a little bit of that genealogy kink. Video 2.